several years ago, when I went to the conference in European countries, I really think that populism is a big problem in the Western society, in the Western industrial societies, that they face a lot of problems. But now it turned to my country, and really a big problem for us. And so I think that in the post-globalization world, we really face a problem that really that kinds of political issues diffused very quickly from one country to another, from European countries to East Asia. So I think that you really find a frontier that we can have a dialogue here, that and also know the situation each other, and try to figure out how to maybe face the political challenge of populism. And so I will present the populism, the situation of populism in Taiwan now. But before that, maybe I still, based on my own understanding, try to present also the background of populism now, what the world is really faced, not only in the European countries. So this is the data come from Ray Dalio. I don't really agree all of his political position or all of his studies, but or his company, or the position of his company. But I really think that his study is a very earlier study that tried to measure the pattern across the time during the last century, that how this one century long history, that how how populism rise up and come down and then rise up again. So he argued that during the last 1 century, we faced twice of the waves of the populism. The first one come after the 1 decade of the Great Depression in 1929, and then the second one happened right now, is the wave just after the 1 decade of a global recession from 2008, and which also means that, in fact, that kind of argument have to link back to the sort of economic losers of global economy. So how could we link back to the economic losers will become a problem, and basically an academic issue that every country that when they face the problem of the political conflict about populism, they have to figure out what's the economic mechanism behind that. So this is so this is my the starting point of my own studies. Although most of these studies are basically written in Chinese, and also have some of them have been published in Chinese, so people in Taiwan or in Hong Kong, people can read it. But I hope that one day I can, try to revise it to an English edition and put it into a broader context that can also use the paper to communicate with you. And so the idea that the idea behind the argument is that we do have two waves of populism also can be linked back to the depression of global economy. In fact, imply some theories that I will call it sort of the theory of economic losers and their political backfire of each country, those which face the problem of populism. So here is the some factors that in Taiwan, in my own study, that I try to link these theories back into the back to the studies, especially about authoritarian regimes, or sometimes now people call it autocratization. The theory about autocratization, the decline of liberal democracy, something like that. People use that kind of theory to explain the wave of the challenge of populism. And so the first argument is about a great recession and also the trade war that can, because people, those who lose jobs and or their income is declining during the area of globalization, they may return to the economic nationalism, something like that, to protect their own interests, although they think that they will protect their own interests. So the same thing also happened in Taiwan, but in a very different way. And we here also face the so-called China impact. And here we mention about China impact means that there was a pattern of the economic penetration into Taiwan and also influenced Taiwan's political structure. So we here also face some domestic issues here in Taiwan. Also, I think that it also happened in the other so-called rust belts, and people losing jobs, and factories shut down, and it happened especially seriously in Taiwan, because our factory, most of them, they are basically very small and medium-sized enterprises. Some of the capitalists, in fact, included the Terry Guo, who is the owner of Foxconn, which is the world factory with 1 million employees in China. When he moved out from Taiwan in around 1996, he is the owner of a small factory which owned around 160 workers in Taipei County. So he then, after around 2 decades, he became the owner of the world factory that have 1 million employees in China. And the people, in fact, criticize that. They think that these kinds of big world factories move out to China and left the unemployed workers protest on the street. This is a big issue. So we face the problem of industrial transformation. We face the problem of welfare reform. Taiwan, just like Japan, we have a problem of the aging society. People get the more and more people rely on pension, but less and less workforce pay for that. So we also have a system like a pay-as-you-go pension system, very similar, based on, we call it labor insurance system, which is very close to Germany, our insurance system. So we also face the problem that we have an aging population and a declining fertility rate, and face the pressure of migration from the East Asian countries. So in addition, during the around 1960 to 2016 to 2019, we have passed a series of laws about same-sex marriage, legalized the same-sex marriage in East Asia. This is the first country that we can legally have same-sex partners here. So it lead to a big cultural war between different generations that really makes a lot of problems here. But how to put that kinds of social context into a study about populism is my problem that I have written several Chinese papers that are based on that. So we have some basic ideas, know that people are angry about the economic situation. We know that there are some losers, but the losers, some of them depends more on the trade with China. So the structure here just reversed in Taiwan, the structure of populism in Taiwan just reversed the situation. Not really simply like the European one. So we have the some theories here try to link to the idea that because Taiwan and here, so I have to do some. I hope that it will be brief. Introduction to Taiwan history before populism. So it's a long history, but I will put it very simple. I hope so. And so we Taiwan is basically occupied by non-Chinese, basically Pacific aboriginals before the maritime. So sometimes the Beijing history, some say they will make that kind of historical textbook say Taiwan is always one part of China. I don't think it's true. And in fact, most of the people, of Chinese people, come to Taiwan after 17th century. It's 18th century or 19th century moved into Taiwan. So before that, it's also have been occupied by some European countries, become a European colony during the 17th centuries. So 17th century, and at that time, in fact, the sort of officers from Netherlands, basically they come from the VOC, which is the Eastern Indian company. So the officers of the company say that in fact during 17th century there was around 11 regimes, kingdoms of the aboriginals that occupied the island. So after that, after the Koshinka, which is the pirate king that come from China and occupy the island, and then after that his regime is being destroyed by Qing dynasty. Then a lot of Han, Chinese migrations come from China from 18th century and the 19th century. So after that, in fact, in the early 20th century, based on Japanese census, they tell us that around at that time now until now there are more than 80% of our population are Chinese from around late 19th century. So then it's occupied by Japan and hand over to China, Republic of China, in 1949, 1945. But after 1945, after the Civil War, the Chiang Kai-shek government just moved into the island, occupied the island, become the island's legalized the government from around 1949. And so during the authoritarian regime period, it is around 40 years from 1950s to 1980s that people are told that you are Chinese, not Taiwanese. But which means that one day that Taiwan will be reunionized with the Chinese government, with China, which although we don't know which one government will become the one that will reunionize. So after 1990s, we now have a political transition, that democratization, and also we view the rise of the Taiwanese identity. Most of the people say that if you mention about Taiwanese or when you mention about Taiwanese, in fact, it is around 80% of the population, and the Mandarins, mainlanders who come from China in 1949 with the KMT government is around 15% of the population. So people feel that they are the minority, they are ruled by the minorities. Which means that the parliament and the government are basically controlled by the mainlanders. So after that, we have a franchise, we have an election. So the problem have been basically dismissed between the ethnic groups, the mainlanders and the Taiwanese or Fukkienese. So after that, we face a long-term political divide between the green and the blue. Green means that they are for independence. They're based on very strong Taiwanese identity, and those people they hope that one day they will become now Taiwan is of course de facto independent regime, but they hope that one day people will openly say that Taiwan is an independent country. And the other side is the KMT, which is post-authoritarian party, that they think that they also have the contribution to the development of Taiwan, economic development of Taiwan. And also they think that they will have a good relation with Beijing. They should, Taiwan's economy should rely on the relationship with the Beijing government. So here I just put on it for Beijing, or basically they argue that in the long term, Taiwan will have a reunionization with China. So this is the basic political divide in Taiwan for years, for less than 3 decades, I think. So, so how is the Taiwan's economy right now? If you just observe the GDP per capita, you in current US dollars, it will underestimate Taiwan's economy, because you will see that Taiwan's economy, Taiwan's GDP per capita is around to 20,000 to 30,000 US dollars. But if you calculate in the purchase power here in Taiwan, you will find that it will very close to Japan and Sweden and Germany GDP per capita. But I think that this is an overestimation. So the truth is that the truth is in between. That I think that Taiwan is more, Taiwan's purchasing power, the real economic standard, the living standard is around maybe Spain or Hungary, maybe, I think. So so this is the situation now. And also we see the increasing problem here. Taiwan, because of the post-industrialization, deindustrialization, basically a lot of factories moved to China, and for purchasing for very cheap wage labor. There they call it migrant laborers in China. Migrant present, sometimes as migrant workers in China. And also we face a lot of switch up problems here in Taiwan. We also have a debate here. But the situation in Taiwan is that because the factory is moving out, so the poverty rate, the more open to China, more dependence on Chinese economy, the more poor people here in Taiwan. People complain about that, especially young people. And so we see another picture here, the young generation, especially the millennials, that they have much lower wage during the last 2 decades. From 20 to 40 here on the picture is that people from 20 to 40, the younger generation are basically the millennials. They face the much lower wage than the earlier generations that have a high-speed economic development period. The cohort that which is the baby boomers. So there was a great wage gap and the unemployment rate difference between the baby boomers and the millennials. So it led to a wave of the so-called, maybe a little bit like the left-wing populism in 2014. That is the Sunflower Movement, which is people occupy the area of the parliament and try to stop an open trade agreement with China. And this is the Sunflower Movement. People occupy the streets, also the parliaments, and this is a protest against the trade and service agreement with China, which will open especially the finance and the service sector of Taiwan to Chinese investment. And so the students and also some young working poor people, they surge into the parliaments and also try to stop the digitalization of that kinds of agreement. And so after that, the DPP government returned to the power. And so this is the election turnout during the last 2 decades. And as you can see that we call it the blue sky and the green land, which means that the green means the pro-democratic, pro-independent, democratic progressive party. And they occupy basically the South Taiwan, because those people who suffer more from the open trade, the farmers and the workers, basically blue-collar workers, they are losing jobs, the economy, their living standards are declining, and they are angry on the open trade to China. And in 2014, we faced one wave of the young and left wing against a globalization movement on the street. But after that, we faced another also very interesting backfire from another side, that is from China side. So for Beijing government wave of populism, which is so it's very difficult to make it clear that why people think that the populism could be linked to open trade to China. This is a missing link. I think that are very different compared Taiwan's populism to European populism. And but based on our study, we find that the self-employed people and also unemployed people, because they suffer much more during the last 5 years. And this is because from 2016, when the DPP government come back to power and get the president, when the president election, they face the punishment from Beijing. The Beijing government simply stopped the tourists black tourists come to Taiwan. From 2016, they stopped the individual tourists come to Taiwan, and after that, from 2018, they stopped all the tourists almost to Taiwan. And this is why, in fact, I say that Taiwan is very lucky before the pandemic, because the whole tourist industry has been shut down before the pandemic, because the Beijing government want to punish Taipei. So who suffer most from that kinds of policies? Of course, the tourist industry, and also night markets, the small vendors, and a lot of the small and medium-sized service sector enterprises, the restaurant owners, they suffer much more than the others, because Taiwan also famous for the electronic industry, which doesn't really matter because of that kinds of policy punishment. They don't hurt anymore. So they don't really hurt at all. So the really punishment come to the precariats, come to those people who really depends on the low wage service sector as a punishment on the sunflower movement, also the DPP government. And so a lot of the middle and middle age unemployment workers, they face the unemployment problem again after the factory move out, and now they face the problem that they also been again face the problem of unemployment from the low wage service sector. So so in 2018, we faced two populist leaders. They want to involve into the presidential election. That is Ke Wen-je and Han Kuo-yu. And Han Kuo-yu, Ke Wen-je is a rising star from the sunflower movement. In the very beginning, he represent the social forces of young people that they don't trust both DPP government and also the KMT party. And he rise up in a very short period and become the Taipei city mayor and try to challenge the DPP government's authority. And another one is Han Kuo-yu, who rise up from the KMT government, but basically is a maverick before 2018. And his argument is that if we reopen to China, if we control if the KMT back to power and we open to China again, we will get a lot of money from China. And if you vote to support Han Kuo-yu will give you that chance that sell goods, welcome people, and also a lot of and also argue for common economy for commons. And this is the very populist arguments, but he tried to link it to rely on China, rely on Chinese Beijing government's will to get some money for the working poor here in Taiwan. So the linkage is quite different from the European populists, as we know, because we know that European populists may be they don't like migration. They also criticize open trade, but basically turn the issue to the anti-migration policy. But in Taiwan, here is very, very different. The populists link the issue to the open trade to China. So this is the second wave of populism during the last decades, last 1 decade. So we see that they also use the populist tools to the election campaign. That is, they use sort of disinformation, attack the DPP government, and they also use the sometimes we have sort of evidence show that basically Han Kuo-yu did get the support from Beijing, but which is, you know, it may not really illegal, but the Beijing government use a lot of policy tools to support Han Kuo-yu, and also put a lot of money into the on the internet to support the campaign online. So we see that in a very short period, around 6 months, in the late 2018, there was a strong wave of the on the website and support Han Kuo-yu and criticize DPP government for their basically failure open trade policy to China. So they try to the Han Kuo-yu try to link the issue to the campaign, and but in 2019, which is the year I think that changed the history, that after Han Kuo-yu became after the failure of the DPP in the 2018 local election, then comes the Hong Kong protest and also the pandemic. So this really changed a lot, and people think that again, like the 2014 Sunflower movement, people also support Hong Kong, and people have support Hong Kong's umbrella movement at that time in Taiwan. But again, the Hong Kong, the political situation in Hong Kong, again impact on Taiwan, and also Taiwan is seeing that if you become more and more reliant on Chinese economy, you will face the same tragedy like the Hong Kong people, that your autonomy you will lose, the Taiwan government will lose its autonomy, and the Taiwan's legislation system could be dismissed by Beijing government, and a lot of problems here. People think that also people suffer from the disinformation campaigns, maybe from Beijing government. So especially after the pandemic, a lot of people just changed their mind in the 2020 election. So we face a wave of the populist wave, as I show here. There was an approval rate. This is a survey come from Academia Sinica, my institute. We have an approval survey from the KMT government to the DPP government. We do the same thing, basically based on the same survey. So during the last 2 decades, we have a half year. We have a survey on the government's approval rate. So here is just I want to show you the last two years data. So we in 2018 in June, we faced still a very strong populist wave of the support the KMT government, a pro-Beijing policy, until 2018 December. But after that, we see a strong decline of the popular approval rate of the populist politicians. And especially after the pandemic, you see a very strong distrust of the populist leaders who try to return to a more moderate strategy and a relationship with the Beijing government. People now still have very serious concern about the reopen to China, either on the trade or on the tourist industry. So also the DPP's approval rate of President Tsai Ing-wen have rise again, especially from the Hong Kong protest. Around the Hong Kong protest, we see a cross line of the blue and the greens approval rate. So Ke Wen-je also have a high rate of approval rate, even higher than the Green Party in the December 2018. But after that, he also faced a landslide that down to the earth, basically. So when we see more, when we try to decompose it into different social classes, we also find that basically who come back to the Penguin camp. So we find that because the working class and the self-employed, they suffer more, especially in the service sector. They suffer much more during the punishment of Beijing. They stop the relation. They try to block the tourist industry and also try to use the coercive forces, some military forces to show their concern on the independent political pattern. So we see that the self-employed and the unemployment and the working class is basically the promote the populist approval rate in the very beginning, but the middle class is the first one that turn back to the green, and also the employers, these two groups who also face the problem of the trade war. Trade war means that the supply chain will be changed from China to back to Taiwan. The employers, the big capitalists, business groups, they face that problem. And also the middle class think that this is maybe not a good thing to rely on the populist politicians. So we see basically a realignment during the last very big strong realignment, political realignment during the last during the last 4 years of the first term of the Tsai Ing-wen government, because you see the blue sky Greenland period, which means that the DPP government is supported by the working class and the farmers in the South Taiwan. But after now we see is that the high and middle classes now return to the green side, because before the pandemic and the Hong Kong issue, they support the KMT government, but they turn back to the DPP side because of the trade war concern and also the pandemic concerns that related to their political interests, and that undermines very soon the base of the populist politicians. So it's a very complicated story. I have to say that during the last 2 years, we also try to figure out what had really happened in Taiwan, and this is the basic conclusion that we figure out from the surveys. We find that although the rise of the populism is not simply determined by class politics, data show that the origin of the pan-blue Han wave voters, they are the unemployment, precarious of the service sector, and they are still there. They think that they suffer from the DPP government's trade policy, also suffer from the punishment from Beijing government. But their argument is that they want to reopen to China. And but in 2019, we also faced the Hong Kong protest that really changed people's mind, especially the middle class, that they think that they should not continually support populist politicians, even though before that they think that they open to China may be a good idea, but now they changed their mind. The middle class shifted very soon to the pro-DPP political coalition, and after the shock of the local election, Pen Green presents a significant increase of the new middle classes and working. In fact, working class just turn back to DPP also, and the Hong Kong issue also facilitated changes of class realignment, and the pandemic after this year may change the trend, but also may not change the trend, but might consolidate the class realignment, which means that now the high and middle classes have more and more of them support the DPP government, not the KMT, the pro Beijing and also pro globalization policy camp. So I think that this is an very complicated turning point. We face that maybe change people's understanding of Taiwan's story, because during the last 2 decades before the presidential election, people think that KMT government is pro Beijing. That's right, but they're supported by the big business and also supported by the middle classes, professionals who get a benefit from globalization, also from open to China. But during the last 2 elections, we face a big swing that people change how they think about their class interests, also change their voting behavior in a very terrible realignment. So we also try to figure out what really happened, but it's really I think that it's still pretty different from the European version of populism, because here we don't really have so many migration. Population also did not really irritate the anti-migration issues policies here. So the real issue related to populism is open to China, especially on trade and investment. So it may show the flexibility, I think, of populism, which is not really very consolidated, very coherent political agenda. And it could be used to link to different issues in different contexts. Say that they just want to help the lower class, common people, something like that, but not really have a clear strategy or a very good framework of policy.